Good morning. Welcome to the seminar, Crossing Ancient Sacred Landscapes. Mike and I would like to thank all of you for joining us in this great event. It is now 100 years since the first professional archaeological excavations were carried out in the early southern Levant. As everywhere in the Middle East, archaeology in the region has been influenced by the international politics and conflicts. The establishment of the British Mandate of Palestine marked the beginning of the golden age of European archaeology in the southern Levant, and it was Prince Petrie who in the 1920s carried out excavations at 4 sites in the northwest Negev and northern Sinai, refining his method of stratigraphic excavation of tells and the relationship between pottery and stratigraphy. But Petrie's excavations were on urban centers located in the periphery of the arid south, and most rural sites in the deep desert began to be known decades later and mainly through surveys. It was actually Nelson Gluck who pioneered in the surveying of dozens of archaeological sites in the Negev and southern Transjordan during the 1930s and 40s. The extent of Gluck's work can be cited by the fact that scholars still use, even critically, his data and conclusions. His excavations in 1937 at the Nabatean temple of Hebet et Tanur provided a treasure trove of material for studying the religions of the Nabateans. Surveys and excavations in the central Negev intensified during the 1980s, when following the 1978 peace accords between Egypt and Israel, an emergency survey was conducted before the Israeli redeployment from Sinai to the Negev. Thanks to these and later surveys and excavations, we know more about the archaeology of cult and afterlife of the Negev than about other regions, mostly exemplified by the large Neolithic Gothic complex excavated at Ramat Saharanim. Most recently, excavations at early mosques in the Negev have revolutionized our understanding of the transition from the late antiquity to the Islamic period in the arid south. Moving to the other side of the Wadi Araba, archaeology in southern Jordan initially concentrated in the Central Highlands, with the pioneering excavations led by Crystal M. Bennett in the Edomite site of Busayra, Tawilan, and Biyara during the 1960s and 70s. Archaeology in the area has boomed since the 1994 peace accords between Israel and Jordan, especially in the boundary of the desert Wadi Araba. The hundreds of archaeological sites in almost pristine conditions that dot the mining district of Finan were the focus of one of the earliest studies in archaeometallurgy in the world. One of the highlights in the region is the spectacular site of Wadi Finan 16, where evidence of the local Neolithic cults and mortuary beliefs have been magnificently preserved. Recent years have witnessed incredible evidence of the development of ancient cults in the desert of southeast Jordan, such as the Neolithic installation with inscribed stela recently discovered by the French Jordanian Southeastern Badia Archaeological Project. During the 20th century, European scholars such as Alois Musil and fathers Josena Savignac traveled and recorded dozens of archaeological sites and epigraphic inscriptions in the arid southern Levant and Arabia. Yet, during later decades, the tensions between the newly formed state of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and particularly Israel meant that the archaeology of the southern Levant and that of Arabia worked in parallel without contacts with each other. An artificial barrier was erected in the desert. It was not until the late 1960s and early 70s when the first archaeological surveys were carried out in northern Arabia, starting by the British team led by Peter Parr, and later followed by excavations at Haima done by American and Saudi scholars. Now, during the last decades, things have started to change rapidly. Saudi Arabia has developed a reformist policy aimed to boost international tourism in order to reduce the economic dependence on oil revenue. The country is now open to Western archaeological excavations, while the region that has benefited most is the northern Hijaz, where there is an abundance of sites ready to be developed for tourism. Research carried out by French, German, and Austrian teams in conjunction with Saudi scholars has concentrated on ancient Hijazi Oasis centers such as Taima, Kuraya, Madin Salih, and Al-Ula. These excavations have not only extended our knowledge of the history of human settlement thousands of years further back than previously thought, but combined with paleo-environmental research, have provided a treasure trove of new information about the Asian landscapes, climate, and ecosystems. The new excavations have also provided new archaeological and biographic evidence of the local cults in the first millennia BCE-CE, including those of Thyma, Dedan, and the Nabateans. Since the turn of the millennium, the archaeology of the region has taken a great leap in new directions. The first one is the development of aerial and satellite archaeology, pioneered since the 1990s by the incredible work of the APAME project in the deserts of Jordan and Northern Arabia. The second leap is the development of digital humanities projects and tools. At the forefront have been the digital GIS databases and archaeological maps covering the area, particularly the Mega Jordan website of the Department of Antiquities of Jordan, where sites are recorded per region, and the online map of the Archaeological Survey of Israel, where the sites are displayed in survey squares. Both maps now cover most of the Addis Levant. A great new tool are the digital maps created by the IAMINA project, partly based here at the University of Oxford, which uses optical analysis of satellite imagery to record and make available information on threatened archaeological sites and landscapes, including Northern Arabia. I would like to finish with the project I'm currently pursuing at Oxford, called the Desert Coast Mapping Project, which aims to study the circular landscapes of the Addis Southern Jordan and Israel. It does so by adopting an interdisciplinary approach at the intersection between digital humanities and archaeological research, with extensive use of geospatial technology, archaeological data, and historical sources from a non-direct perspective. Now, the project is building an open access digital database with associated map listing all the cultic and mortuary sites from the Neolithic to the early Islamic period. So far, we have listed more than 5,000 sites, including open-air courtyard sanctuaries, high places, rock shelter spaces, Christian churches, and Islamic mosques. Also tumuli, pit, cist burials, and cave burials, and standing stone sites. I expect to have it functioning in 2024.
I apologize in advance to the epigraphists here, who will know everything I am about to say, but I thought it might possibly be of interest to those whose expertise lies elsewhere. Although Nabatean graffiti were probably found in Sinai at an earlier date, the first Nabatean inscriptions in the southern Levant were copied by an English traveller, William John Banks, on his journeys in Syria, Jordan and Egypt in 1818. Unfortunately, he didn't publish his copies, and they were only discovered and published in the 2000s by Norman Lewis. The ancient North Arabian inscriptions, that is, the Taimanitic, Dadanitic, Safaitic, Hismaic and Thamudic texts, were first recorded in the second half of the 19th century. In 1858, the so-called Safaitic inscriptions were discovered by a Scotsman, Cyril Graham, in the basalt desert of what is now southern Syria, near a huge mass of lava called Asafar. It is unfortunate that the French scholar Joseph Lévy chose to use this name to label the inscription Safaitic, since to date no Safaitic inscriptions have been found on Asafar. A more appropriate name, Harra inscriptions, was used by German scholars after the Arabic word for the basalt desert, Harra, but it was unfortunately superseded by Safaitic. Almost 80,000 Safaitic graffiti have been discovered so far, and new ones are being added to the corpus every year. They are particularly interesting since, as many of you will know, they were carved by the nomads of the area, who sometime in the second half of the first millennium BC became literate in a script which was quite different from those used by the settled peoples around them in what is now Syria and Jordan, and belongs to the script family used in the Arabian Peninsula. Another script from the same family is found mainly in the Hisma Desert in southern Jordan and northwest Saudi Arabia, and occasionally in a few other places, and so I have suggested the script be called Hismaic. Like the Safaitic graffiti, most of the Hismaic texts seem to have been carved by nomads and are accompanied by large numbers of rock drawings. The term Thamudic is a sort of pending file, a general term for the many pre-Islamic North Arabian scripts which have not yet been fully described. There are thousands of graffiti in these scripts across the western two-thirds of the peninsula, and until recently the vast majority were known only from hand copies made by travellers who could not read the scripts. However, in recent years, more and more of these graffiti have been recorded with photographs, and steady progress is being made in identifying the different scripts, which often use the same letter shape to represent quite different sounds. For instance, a straight line can be N in one script and R in another, and in interpreting them. Unfortunately, most of them are fairly short and say very similar things, and so it is difficult to identify the language or languages with any certainty. In the oases of northwest Arabia, the inscriptions of Tema and Dadan, modern Alula, have recently been intensively studied by Foucaulin Kotstra, who has shown that the language of Tema was actually much closer to Hebrew and Aramaic than to Arabic, while Ahmed al-Jalad has shown that the language of Dadan and the Lichenites was distinct from Arabic, though it was quite close to it. Very recently, a number of graffiti by someone claiming to be the king of Dumat, modern Dumat al-Janda, and dating from the mid-6th century BC, have been discovered by Jérôme Norris and others, and these provide us with the first clear evidence of the language and script used in ancient Dumat. Ahmed al-Jalad has shown that the languages of both the Safavidic and the Hismaic graffiti carved by nomads are the earliest written dialects of Arabic. This is a discovery of great importance since, apart from these texts, Arabic remained a largely unwritten language until the middle of the first millennium AD. For although the Nabateans spoke Arabic, they used the Aramaic language and script for writing. It was only in the 4th to 6th centuries AD that people in northwest Arabia started using the Nabatean Aramaic script to write their spoken language Arabic, and this practice seems to have spread relatively quickly to Syria and possibly Palestine and Iraq in the centuries before the revelation of Islam. As many of you will know, the ancient North Arabian inscriptions are being collected together in the online corpus of the inscriptions of ancient North Arabia, Oceania for short, though I'm afraid we are a bit behind with entering the enormous numbers of inscriptions which have been discovered in the last few years. However, thanks to Ahmed al-Jalad's considerable help, we hope that this problem should be sorted out in the near future. There is now also a new database created by Leila Neme and Jérôme Norris called the Digital Corpus of the Nabatean and Developing Arabic Inscriptions, DICUNAB for short, which should be available online very soon. If I may turn to rock art, and I speak under correction from the rock art experts here, this has, of course, a vastly longer history than writing in the area we are dealing with, but generally, of course, it's even more difficult to date with any precision. We find prehistoric abstract drawings, wavy lines, patterns made with dots, etc., as well as images of animals such as bovids, which we assume could only have survived in a more humid climate than has existed in the last few thousand years. There are, of course, plenty of later subjects such as wild animals, chariots, entertainers, camel litters, and, of course, thousands of camels. Horses only seem to appear from about the 2nd century BC onwards. A particularly interesting subject of rock art is the desert kite, of which we have a number of representations, including the famous Safavidic drawing, in which I've suggested it is being reused as an enclosure for goats, note the vertical tails. By contrast, the other side of the stone shows a hunt, but not one using a kite. To the best of my knowledge, no rock drawings of mustatil or other structures have been found yet, but fingers crossed. Of course, the most dramatic examples of rock art in the area we're dealing with at this seminar are the enormous reliefs of camels which Maria Guanyin and Guillaume Chalot have discovered and recorded in northwest Arabia, with possible 14C evidence for a time they were carved. But at this point I shall stop and let you get to the real meat of this seminar, which I hope you'll all enjoy. Thank you and enjoy the seminar.